A Journey Through Human History, Part 2.1, Empires of Persia and the Rise of Greece. Human civilization, having laid its foundations in the great river valleys of Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and China, was now entering a new era, an age defined not only by the creation of cities and writing, but by the rise of vast empires and revolutionary ideas that would shape the future of human thought. One of the first great imperial powers to dominate the ancient world was the Persian Empire. Founded by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BC, Persia rapidly expanded across a vast territory stretching from the Indus River in the east to the edges of Greece in the west. Unlike many earlier kingdoms, the Persian Empire was remarkable for its organization and tolerance. Conquered peoples were often allowed to keep their customs, languages, and religions, as long as they accepted Persian authority and paid taxes to the emperor. To manage such a massive territory, the Persians built an advanced system of roads and communication networks. The most famous of these was the Royal Road, which allowed messages and goods to travel quickly across thousands of kilometers. Relay stations with fresh horses ensured that royal messengers could deliver information with incredible speed for the ancient world. While Persia was rising in the east, a very different form of civilization was developing in the small, scattered city-states of ancient Greece. Unlike large centralized empires, Greece was divided into independent cities, each with its own government, laws, and traditions. Two of the most powerful were Athens and Sparta, which represented completely different visions of society. Athens ** became a center of learning, philosophy, and political experimentation. It is often credited as the birthplace of democracy, where citizens, though limited to free men, could participate directly in decision-making. Public debates, assemblies, and philosophical discussions shaped Athenian life. Thinkers such as Socrates began asking fundamental questions about morality, knowledge, and human existence, challenging people to think critically rather than simply accept tradition. Sparta **, on the other hand, built its entire society around military strength. From a young age, Spartan boys were trained to endure hardship, obey authority, and become elite warriors. Life was strict, disciplined, and centered on loyalty to the state. While Sparta produced fewer cultural achievements than Athens, its military power made it one of the most feared forces in the ancient Mediterranean. Tensions between Greece and Persia eventually erupted into conflict in the Greco-Persian Wars. One of the most famous battles occurred at Marathon in 490 BC, where a smaller Greek force managed to defeat a much larger Persian army through superior tactics and discipline. Another legendary confrontation took place at Thermopylae, where King Leonidas and his Spartan warriors made a heroic last stand against overwhelming Persian forces. Although they were ultimately defeated, their resistance became a symbol of courage and sacrifice. The Greek victory in these wars had a profound impact. It preserved the independence of the Greek city-states and allowed their culture to flourish without Persian control. In the following decades, Greece entered a golden age of philosophy, art, science, and architecture. During this period, three of history's most influential thinkers emerged: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates taught by asking questions, encouraging people to examine their beliefs. Plato expanded his ideas and wrote about ideal forms of government and justice. Aristotle, a student of Plato, studied nearly every field of knowledge known at the time, from biology to logic, laying the foundations of scientific thinking that would influence scholars for over 2,000 years. Meanwhile, political tensions among Greek city-states continued. Eventually, internal conflict weakened Greece, creating an opportunity for a rising kingdom in the north ** Macedonia **. Under King Philip II, and later his son Alexander the Great, Macedonia united the Greek world. Alexander was not only a brilliant military commander but also a visionary leader. After securing control over Greece, he launched one of the most extraordinary military campaigns in history. Alexander's armies marched eastward, defeating the Persian Empire and conquering territories that stretched from Egypt to Mesopotamia, Persia, and all the way to India. In just over a decade, he created one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen. However, Alexander's empire was fragile. After his death at the age of 32, it quickly broke apart into smaller kingdoms ruled by his generals. Even so, his legacy endured. Greek language, art, architecture, and philosophy spread across vast regions, blending with local cultures in what became known as the Hellenistic Age. This cultural fusion helped preserve and spread knowledge across continents, influencing future civilizations in profound ways. As Greek influence expanded, a new power was rising in the West, one that would eventually surpass even Alexander's empire and dominate the Mediterranean world, Rome. The stage was set for a new era of conquest, law, and empire that would define the next chapter of human history. #A Journey Through Human History, Part 2.2, The Rise of Rome and the Fall of the Ancient World. While the legacy of Alexander the Great spread across the eastern Mediterranean, a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber River was beginning a journey that would change the entire world. That settlement was Rome. According to legend, Rome was founded in 753 BC by the twins Romulus and Remus. Whether myth or history, what is certain is that Rome began as a modest city surrounded by rival tribes. Through discipline, military organization, and political innovation, it gradually expanded its influence across the Italian peninsula. At first, Rome was a republic, not an empire. Power was not held by a single ruler, but divided among elected officials and governing bodies such as the Senate. Roman citizens valued law, duty, and civic responsibility. This system allowed Rome to grow while maintaining internal stability, even as it faced constant wars with neighboring states. As Rome expanded, it encountered one of its greatest rivals, Carthage, a powerful city-state located in North Africa. The conflict between them became known as the Punic Wars, a series of brutal and strategic wars that lasted over a century. One of the most famous figures of this period was the Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca. In an extraordinary military feat, Hannibal led his army, including war elephants, across the Alps into Italy, surprising the Romans and winning several major battles. Despite his brilliance, Rome eventually adapted, regrouped, and defeated Carthage, ultimately destroying it and securing dominance over the western Mediterranean. As Rome's power grew, internal tensions also increased. Ambitious generals began competing for control, and the republic slowly weakened. One of the most famous of these leaders was Julius Caesar, a brilliant military commander and politician. After conquering Gaul and expanding Roman territory, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River, triggering a civil war that ultimately ended the Roman Republic. Caesar became dictator, but his rule was short-lived. In 44 BC, he was assassinated by senators who feared his growing power. However, instead of restoring the republic, his death led to more conflict and the eventual rise of his adopted heir, Augustus, who became the first emperor of Rome. Under Augustus, Rome entered a long period of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. Roads, aqueducts, temples, and cities flourished across the empire. Roman engineering and law became the foundation of Western civilization, influencing legal systems and infrastructure for centuries to come. During this era, a small but significant religious movement began in the eastern provinces of the empire. Christianity, founded on the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, initially spread quietly among local communities. Despite periods of persecution, its message gradually gained followers throughout the Roman world. In 79 AD, one of the most dramatic natural disasters in ancient history occurred. The volcano Mount Vesuvius erupted violently, burying the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under ash and preserving them in time. This catastrophe provides modern archaeologists with an extraordinary snapshot of daily life in ancient Rome. As centuries passed, the Roman Empire grew increasingly difficult to manage. Its vast territory, internal political instability, economic struggles, and external invasions placed enormous pressure on its structure. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire officially fell, marking the end of ancient classical civilization in the West. However, Rome did not disappear entirely. The Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued for nearly 1,000 more years, preserving Roman law, Greek knowledge, and Christian tradition. The fall of Rome marked a turning point in history. Europe entered a new era, later called the Middle Ages, while other parts of the world continued to develop powerful civilizations. Although empires rose and fell, the knowledge, culture, and innovations of the ancient world did not vanish. They became the foundation upon which future civilizations would be built. Human history was entering a new chapter, one defined by transformation, faith, conflict, and rediscovery. The ancient world had ended, but its influence would never fade. #A Journey Through Human History, Part 3, The Middle Ages and Global Civilizations. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, Europe entered a period of profound transformation. Centralized imperial authority collapsed, and in its place arose a patchwork of small kingdoms, local rulers, and feudal systems. This era became known as the Middle Ages, a time often misunderstood as purely dark and stagnant, but in reality filled with both hardship and remarkable progress. Power in medieval Europe became decentralized. Kings ruled large territories in name, but real control often rested with local lords and nobles who governed their own lands. Society was organized through the feudal system, where land was exchanged for loyalty and military service. At the bottom of this structure were peasants, who worked the land to support the entire system. Despite political instability, medieval life was not without advancement. One of the most important institutions of the time was the castle, which served not only as military fortifications but also as administrative centers and symbols of power. Over time, architecture improved, and massive stone cathedrals began to rise across Europe, reflecting both religious devotion and growing engineering skill. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Rome, preserved much of the ancient world's knowledge. Its capital, Constantinople, became one of the wealthiest and most advanced cities in the world, strategically located between Europe and Asia. Byzantine scholars maintained Roman law, Greek philosophy, and Christian traditions, ensuring that ancient knowledge was not lost. In the 7th century, a new and rapidly expanding civilization emerged in the Arabian Peninsula, the Islamic Caliphates. Within a century, Islamic empires stretched from Spain in the west to India in the east. During what is known as the Islamic Golden Age, scholars made groundbreaking contributions in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and philosophy. Many Greek and Roman texts were preserved and expanded upon in cities such as Baghdad, which became a global center of learning. At the same time, trade networks were expanding across continents. The Silk Road connected China, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, allowing not only goods such as silk, spices, and gold to travel, but also ideas, inventions, religions, and technologies. This global exchange slowly transformed the medieval world into an increasingly interconnected system. In northern Europe, seafaring warriors known as the Vikings began exploring and raiding across vast distances. Originating from Scandinavia, they traveled as far as North America, Russia, and the Mediterranean. While often remembered for raids, the Vikings were also skilled traders, navigators, and settlers who established trade routes and colonies. Between the 11th and 13th centuries, Europe launched a series of religious and military campaigns known as the Crusades. These conflicts between Christian and Muslim powers reshaped political boundaries and increased cultural exchange between East and West. Although violent, the Crusades also introduced Europeans to new knowledge, goods, and technologies from the Islamic world. One of the most transformative forces in world history emerged in the 13th century under Genghis Khan, who united the Mongol tribes and created the largest contiguous land empire in history. The Mongol Empire stretched from China to Eastern Europe, enforcing strict discipline and opening trade routes across Eurasia. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road became safer than ever before, allowing unprecedented movement of goods, people, and ideas. However, the 14th century brought one of the greatest catastrophes in human history, the Black Death. This devastating plague swept through Europe, Asia, and North Africa, killing an estimated one-third of Europe's population. Entire villages disappeared, economies collapsed, and social structures were deeply shaken. Yet from this tragedy eventually emerged significant social and economic changes that reshaped European society. By the late Middle Ages, cities were growing again, trade was expanding, and education was becoming more accessible. Universities such as Bologna, Oxford, and Paris began forming the intellectual foundations of Europe. These developments set the stage for a dramatic cultural rebirth, the Renaissance. Human history was once again approaching a turning point. After centuries of change, conflict, and survival, the world was about to rediscover art, science, exploration, and human potential on an entirely new scale. The Renaissance, exploration, and the birth of modern science. As Europe slowly recovered from the hardships of the Middle Ages, a powerful cultural transformation began in Italy and gradually spread across the continent. This period became known as the Renaissance, meaning rebirth. It marked a renewed interest in the ideas, art, science, and philosophy of ancient Greece and Rome, combined with new discoveries about the world and humanity itself. The Renaissance produced some of the most extraordinary minds in human history. Artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo pushed the boundaries of creativity and engineering. Leonardo studied anatomy, flight, engineering, and physics, filling notebooks with inventions far ahead of his time, while Michelangelo sculpted masterpieces such as David and painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, works that remain symbols of human artistic achievement. At the same time, a revolution in communication changed the spread of knowledge forever. Around 1440, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press in Europe. For the first time, books could be mass-produced rather than copied by hand. This innovation drastically reduced the cost of books and allowed knowledge, science, and ideas to spread across society at an unprecedented speed. It laid the foundation for widespread education and intellectual progress. With new ideas circulating more freely, Europeans began to question old assumptions about the world. This curiosity led to the Age of Exploration, when explorers sought new trade routes across oceans. European powers such as Spain and Portugal financed long and dangerous voyages in search of wealth, spices, and new territories. In 1492, Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic Ocean, reaching the Americas and initiating sustained contact between Europe and the New World. Shortly after, explorers such as Vasco da Gama reached India by sailing around Africa, while Ferdinand Magellan's expedition became the first to circumnavigate the globe, proving that Earth was far larger and more interconnected than previously understood. These voyages reshaped global history. They created new trade networks connecting Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas in what became known as the Columbian Exchange. Crops such as potatoes, corn, and tomatoes were introduced to Europe, while horses, sugar, and wheat spread to the Americas. However, this global connection also brought colonization, the displacement of indigenous populations, and the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, events that had devastating consequences for millions of people. As exploration expanded, so did scientific curiosity. The scientific revolution challenged traditional beliefs and emphasized observation, experimentation, and mathematics as tools for understanding the universe. Nicholas Copernicus proposed that the Earth revolved around the Sun, overturning centuries of geocentric belief. Galileo Galilei ** improved telescopes and provided evidence supporting heliocentrism, while Isaac Newton formulated laws of motion and gravity that explained the physical world with unprecedented precision. These discoveries fundamentally changed humanity's understanding of nature. The universe was no longer seen as static and centered on Earth, but as a vast system governed by natural laws that could be studied and understood. By the late 1700s, another transformation began. The Industrial Revolution. Machines powered by steam engines replaced manual labor in many industries. Factories emerged in rapidly growing cities, producing textiles, iron, and goods on a massive scale. Railways and steamships revolutionized transportation, connecting distant regions and accelerating global trade. This industrial transformation reshaped society. Millions of people moved from rural areas to cities in search of work. While industrialization increased productivity and wealth, it also created harsh working conditions, pollution, and social inequality. Over time, labor movements emerged to demand better rights and conditions for workers. Meanwhile, political revolutions reshaped nations. Inspired by ideas of liberty and equality, countries in Europe and the Americas fought for independence and new forms of government. The American Revolution and the French Revolution challenged traditional monarchies and introduced modern concepts of democracy, citizenship, and human rights. By the 19th century, industrialized nations expanded their global influence through colonization and empire building, competing for resources and territory across Africa and Asia. This period of imperial expansion dramatically reshaped global politics and economies. However, tensions between major powers eventually escalated into global conflict. In 1914, the world entered World War I, a devastating war involving new industrial weapons such as machine guns, tanks, and chemical warfare. The war caused unprecedented destruction and led to the collapse of several empires, including the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, German, and Russian empires. Although peace returned in 1918, the underlying political and economic instability remained unresolved. 2 decades later, the world was again plunged into conflict with the outbreak of World War II in 1939. This war became the deadliest in human history, involving battles across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. It introduced even more advanced weaponry and resulted in catastrophic loss of life, including the Holocaust, one of the darkest atrocities in human history. World War II ended in 1945 with the defeat of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. In its aftermath, the United Nations was created to promote peace, cooperation, and international stability. Soon after, the world entered the Cold War, a period of ideological and geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Although the two superpowers never fought directly, they competed in space exploration, nuclear weapons development, and global influence. One of the greatest achievements of this era was the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969, when humans first set foot on another celestial body. In 1991, the Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The world entered a new era of globalization, marked by rapid advances in communication, trade, and technology. The rise of the internet connected billions of people, transforming how humans communicate, learn, and do business. Today, humanity stands at the edge of another great transformation. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, renewable energy, and space exploration are rapidly reshaping civilization. At the same time, global challenges such as climate change, resource management, and international cooperation demand collective action. The story of human history is not finished. It continues to unfold with every generation, shaped by the choices we make and the knowledge we gain. The future remains unwritten. The modern world and the future of humanity. As the 21st century began, humanity entered an era unlike anything that had come before it. For the first time in history, information, communication, and technology began to evolve at an exponential speed, reshaping nearly every aspect of human life within just a few decades. The internet became the defining invention of the modern age. What began as a limited military and academic network transformed into a global system connecting billions of people instantly. Information that once took weeks or months to travel across continents could now be shared in seconds. This revolution changed education, business, politics, and culture forever. At the same time, advances in computing power led to the rise of artificial intelligence. Machines that once performed simple calculations now began learning patterns, recognizing speech, generating images, and assisting in complex decision-making. AI systems are increasingly becoming part of everyday life, from smartphones and search engines to medical diagnostics and scientific research. Medicine also entered a new golden age. Breakthroughs in genetics, biotechnology, and pharmaceuticals allowed scientists to better understand diseases at the molecular level. Treatments for conditions that were once fatal became manageable or even curable. The rapid development of vaccines demonstrated humanity's ability to respond collectively to global health threats. Space exploration, once a symbol of Cold War competition, evolved into a global scientific effort. Satellites now orbit Earth, enabling communication, navigation, weather forecasting, and environmental monitoring. Space agencies and private companies began working together to return humans to the Moon and eventually plan missions to Mars, signaling the beginning of a new era of interplanetary exploration. However, alongside these extraordinary achievements, humanity also faces serious challenges. Climate change has become one of the most pressing issues of the modern age. Rising global temperatures, extreme weather events, and environmental degradation threaten ecosystems and human societies alike. Scientists and governments are working to develop renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and nuclear fusion in an effort to reduce carbon emissions and protect the planet's future. Globalization has created a world that is more interconnected than ever before, but also more interdependent. Economic crises, pandemics, and political conflicts in one region can now affect the entire planet. This interconnectedness highlights both the strength and fragility of modern civilization. Despite these challenges, humanity continues to demonstrate resilience and creativity. International cooperation through organizations such as the United Nations reflects a growing understanding that global problems require global solutions. Education and communication technologies have empowered millions of people, giving voice to communities that were once isolated or unheard. Culturally, the modern world is more diverse and dynamic than ever. Music, film, literature, and digital media now travel instantly across borders, blending traditions and creating new global forms of expression. The world is no longer divided into isolated civilizations but exists as a complex, interconnected network of cultures and ideas. Looking forward, the future of humanity holds both uncertainty and immense potential. Emerging technologies such as artificial general intelligence, quantum computing, advanced robotics, and genetic engineering may redefine what it means to be human. At the same time, space exploration may expand human civilization beyond Earth, establishing colonies on the Moon, Mars, and possibly beyond. Yet despite all technological progress, the fundamental story of humanity remains the same as it was millions of years ago. It is a story of survival, adaptation, curiosity, and the desire to understand the world and our place within it. From early humans around ancient fires in Africa to a global civilization connected by satellites and digital networks, the journey of humanity has been extraordinary. Every discovery, every crisis, and every achievement has contributed to the world we live in today. And the most important truth is this: the story is still being written.